The candlelight flickered across her face as she delivered the words that should have destroyed me. Instead, I smiled, because she had no idea who was about to walk through that door. The first crack in our marriage wasn't dramatic. It was Tuesday morning and Audrey forgot to kiss me goodbye. For 8 years, through rushed mornings and late nights, through arguments about bills and dreams about vacations we'd never take, she'd always paused at the door. Always turned back with that half-smile that had made me fall in love with her in college. But that Tuesday she just left. I stood in our kitchen, coffee mug suspended halfway to my lips, listening to her car pull out of the driveway. The silence felt different. Heavier. Like the air before a storm. People change, I told myself, pouring the coffee down the sink. Everyone goes through phases. But phases don't last 6 months. Audrey began arriving home with explanations that felt rehearsed. Traffic was insane. Michelle needed to vent about her divorce. I stopped by Mom's. Each excuse delivered with the same distracted tone, her eyes already scanning her phone screen before she'd finished speaking. The woman who used to tell me about every mundane detail of her day, the rude customer at work, the neighbor's new fence, what she'd had for lunch, suddenly became a stranger who communicated in shrugs and one-word answers. "How was your day?" I'd ask. "Fine. Did you finish that project you were worried about?" "Yeah. Wanna watch that show we started?" "I'm tired." Our conversations became archaeological expeditions, me digging desperately for signs of the woman I'd married, while she buried herself deeper into her phone. That device had become her constant companion, accompanying her to the bathroom, the kitchen, even the 30 seconds it took to grab something from the car. The password change happened on a Wednesday. I'd been making lunch when her phone buzzed on the counter. Without thinking, because in 8 years of marriage we'd never hidden anything, I glanced at the screen to see if it was important. Locked. My stomach dropped. I stared at the phone like it was a snake that had just shed its skin. Audrey and I had always known each other's passwords. We'd shared everything: bank accounts, Netflix profiles, even social media logins. It was just how we operated, built on a foundation of complete transparency. Now that foundation had a crack running straight through its center. When Audrey returned from the shower, I was still standing there, the sandwich ingredients forgotten. "Your phone's locked," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. She didn't even look up from towel drying her hair. "Yeah, I updated it. More secure now." "What's the new password?" The toweling stopped. For just a moment her hands stilled and I caught something in her expression. Guilt? Fear? Then she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll tell you later. I'm running late." She never told me. That's when I started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored. The way she angled her phone away from me during conversations. How she'd suddenly developed an interest in girls' nights she'd never mentioned wanting before. The new perfume that appeared on our bathroom counter, something floral and expensive that I'd never smelled on her. The final confirmation came from David, my college roommate turned reluctant messenger. "Look, man," he said over the phone, his voice tight with discomfort. "I saw Audrey yesterday at that new Italian place downtown. She wasn't alone." My throat constricted. "Who was she with?" "Some guy I've never seen before." "They were." He paused and I could hear him struggling with how much to reveal. "They were holding hands, Nick." "I'm sorry." The phone felt impossibly heavy in my grip. "Are you sure it was her?" "I'm sure." "And Nick?" They looked comfortable. Like this wasn't their first time. After I hung up, I sat in my car outside my office building for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. Part of me wanted to storm home and demand answers. Another part wanted to pretend I'd never received the call. But the rational part, the part that had kept me grounded through 8 years of marriage, knew I needed proof. 3 days later, opportunity presented itself with devastating clarity. "I'm running to the store," Audrey announced, grabbing her keys with unusual haste. "Need anything?" She was dressed too nicely for groceries, heels, makeup, the kind of effort she used to make for our date nights but hadn't in months. "I'm good," I replied, watching her reflection in the hallway mirror as she checked her appearance one final time. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, I was in mine. Following someone you love feels like a violation of everything you believe about trust and marriage. Every turn she made, every red light that separated us, felt like another step away from the life I thought we'd built together. When she pulled into the driveway of a house I'd never seen, a small craftsman with blue shutters and a meticulously maintained garden, my hands began to shake. She walked to the front door with the confidence of familiarity. No hesitation, no checking of addresses. Just a woman arriving somewhere she'd been many times before. The door opened before she could knock. He was tall, probably my age, with the kind of casual good looks that belonged in a coffee shop advertisement. But what destroyed me wasn't his appearance, it was his smile. The way his face lit up when he saw her. The way he stepped aside to let her in, his hand briefly touching the small of her back in a gesture so intimate it felt like a physical blow. I sat in my car, photographing my marriage's death through a windshield that suddenly felt like a barrier between my old life and whatever came next. 43 minutes later, she emerged. They lingered in the doorway, talking in the easy way couples do when they have all the time in the world. He said something that made her laugh, really laugh the way she used to laugh with me, and then she was gone. I waited until she'd turned the corner before driving home, my mind strangely calm. The evidence was undeniable now. The only question was what to do with it. That evening she cooked dinner. For the first time in months, Audrey moved around our kitchen with purpose, humming under her breath as she prepared what looked like an elaborate meal. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was cooking for the husband she was betraying, probably summoning the energy from her afternoon with another man. "This looks amazing," I said, settling into my chair as she lit candles I hadn't seen in years. She smiled, and for a moment, I glimpsed the woman I'd fallen in love with. "I thought we should have a nice dinner together." We ate in relative silence, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on us like humidity before a thunderstorm. Every bite felt mechanical, performed. She kept glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Anticipation? Nervousness? Guilt? Finally, I set down my fork and looked directly at her. "I know about him." Her face didn't change immediately. For a heartbeat, she continued chewing as if she hadn't heard me. Then, slowly, she placed her own fork down and leaned back in her chair. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos from that afternoon. Her walking to his door. His hand on her back. The two of them laughing together like lovers do. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, almost relieved. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." She nodded, then did something that surprised me. She smiled. Not the guilty smile of someone caught in a lie, but something sadder and more honest. "I was going to tell you tonight anyway." She gestured to the elaborate dinner, the candles, the wine. "This was supposed to be, I don't know, a goodbye dinner, I guess." "A goodbye. I'm leaving you, Nick." The words should have shattered me. 6 months ago they would have. But sitting there, looking at this woman who had become a stranger, I felt something unexpected. Relief. I stood up, walked to our bedroom, and returned with a manila folder that had been waiting in my dresser drawer for 2 weeks. I placed it on the table between the flickering candles and the half-eaten meal. "Perfect timing," I said, opening the folder to reveal the divorce papers I'd drawn up the moment I'd confirmed my suspicions. "I already took care of the paperwork." For the first time all evening, her composure cracked. She stared at the documents, then at me, searching for some sign of the devastated husband she'd expected to find. That's when the doorbell rang. Audrey's head snapped toward the sound, confusion replacing the confidence that had carried her through her confession. She wasn't expecting anyone, I could see it in her eyes. But I was. I rose from my chair, walked to the front door, and opened it to reveal Sarah, Audrey's best friend since college, the woman who had listened to all of Audrey's secrets, who had been there for every milestone of our marriage. The woman who had been comforting me through the slow death of that same marriage. "Sorry I'm late," Sarah said, stepping into the entryway. "Traffic was terrible." I heard Audrey's sharp intake of breath behind me. Audrey, I said, turning back to my wife with something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction, I'd like you to meet my girlfriend. The look on Audrey's face was worth every sleepless night, every unanswered question, every moment I'd spent doubting my own sanity. It was shock, betrayal, and something else, recognition. Recognition that she had underestimated the man she'd been lying to for months. You can't be serious, she whispered. Sarah moved past me into the dining room, taking in the romantic dinner scene with raised eyebrows. Oh, I'm interrupting something. Should I wait outside? No, I said, not taking my eyes off Audrey. We were just finishing. What followed wasn't pretty. Audrey exploded with the fury of someone who had believed she held all the cards, only to discover she'd been playing against a stacked deck. She accused me of being a hypocrite, of betraying our marriage, of manipulating her best friend. The irony was lost on her entirely. This is different, she kept saying. This is revenge. No, I replied calmly, this is moving on. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Audrey fought for everything. The house, the savings, even my grandmother's wedding ring that I'd foolishly given her years earlier. She painted me as controlling and manipulative, claiming I'd driven her into another man's arms through emotional abuse. But I had photographs. Bank statements showing expensive dinners and hotel rooms charged to our joint account. Text messages that Sarah had helped me recover, revealing months of deception and planning. When the judge finally ruled, Audrey walked away with far less than she'd hoped for and far more than she deserved. 6 months later, I moved into a new apartment across town. Sarah helped me unpack, hanging pictures and arranging furniture in a space that felt entirely mine for the first time in years. Do you ever regret it? She asked one evening as we sat on my new couch, watching the sunset through windows that Audrey had never looked through. I considered the question seriously. Did I regret discovering the truth? Fighting for myself? Refusing to be the victim in someone else's story? No, I said finally. I regret how long it took me to see what was happening. But I don't regret fighting back. Sarah curled closer to me and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the fragile peace of ignorance, but the solid peace that comes from knowing exactly where you stand. Audrey tried to contact me a few times in the months that followed. Texts that started with apologies and ended with accusations. I blocked her number after the third one. The truth is, revenge isn't about making someone else suffer. It's about refusing to suffer yourself. It's about taking back your power when someone tries to steal it. It's about walking away from people who don't value what you bring to their lives. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's about discovering that the person you thought you couldn't live without was actually the person preventing you from truly living at all. That dinner, our last supper together, wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a better one.